evening, everybody. Welcome to another Wednesday night. Christie, how are you doing tonight?
Hey, everybody.
I told you I had a good opening for you tonight. And, of course, look who we got below joining us tonight. Kelly Griggs, how are you doing?
Fabulous, darling.
Fabulous. Well, guys, it's been a while since it's been a year for Christie because it was about this time last year we were all together. And, well, we're back again, and here we go. Christie, how are things in the Great North?
Oh, man, we are just rocking and rolling here in Michigan. You know, we have a ton of crop diversity here, like we do in many of the states that you all are farming in. Hot and heavy with fruit right now. Our grapes are starting coloration, veraison it's called, where the grapes start accumulating something called anthocyanin, and it turns them red or turns them the color of maturity. So that's just starting. We have a couple of grape growing regions all the way along the shoreline of Michigan, and then a few smatterings of grape producers in different areas. So we're really watching that very closely right now, making sure that those grapes start coloring like they're supposed to. That picture that you see on your screen right now is actually some Frontenac Gris, which is an absolutely beautiful grape, and it's in the cold hardy varieties. So that's an American hybrid, so you probably haven't heard about it like you would like a Cabernet Franc or a Cabernet Sauvignon. This is an American hybrid and with a pretty French name, and we love the wines made with that. So we're really watching the fruit very closely. We also have blueberries and raspberries really kicking in big time right now. All of our vegetable production, all of our fruit stand production is just really flourishing. Tomatoes, pickling cucumbers, even our commercial tomatoes and commercial cucumbers that go into pickles and relish and things like that are hot and heavy getting harvested right now. So it's a lot going on here. And I just saw today that one of my clients in the Fruit Ridge of Michigan, we actually have a little area in Kent County called the Fruit Ridge, and they started picking apples. Jersey Max are the name, and that's Schweitzer Orchards in Kent County. So excited to see things really starting to progress here. And as we round out, we closed out July with a really strong wheat harvest despite some crazy weather we had this year. And now cover crops are being sown into the wheat stubble and, just cranking along. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have had, we've all had a crazy year weather-wise this year. We really have.
For sure. Brandon, that picture you just showed is actually a relay crop. If you pull that back up real quick for the viewers out there at home, this is actually a dual crop setup. So this farm was planted to wheat. They twin row planted the wheat last fall, and then when it came time to planting this spring, they went and drilled soybeans in between those rows, in between the wheat rows. So our soybeans now, the wheat was actually just cut 3 weeks ago. So the soybeans now are just exploding with vegetative growth and really starting to pot up. So they're filling in the blank spots where the wheat was clipped out of there. We lost a little bit of the head, the tops of the soybean plant, but it was really a neat deal. And that was the first time that farmer had actually tried that. He's looking to transition to some more regenerative practices to help restore his soil and soil quality and get some weed suppression. Actually, we didn't have to do any herbicide in that particular field because the wheat had shaded out a majority of the weeds. So very cool stuff, and excited to be a part of it.
Oh, absolutely. Now, that is actually, you do quite a bit of work with that, don't you?
Yes, I do. Actually, there's a really interesting kind of renaissance taking place right now, I think, in large scale ag. A lot of farmers are talking about regenerative practices, cover cropping, transitioning to some type of regenerative practice of some kind. I know Kelly and Matt do a phenomenal job of that on their farm, and they've been doing that for a long time, way before it was cool, right? So what I think, am I wrong, Kelly? It's
we were cool before everybody else was cool.
Now, of course, you guys started it too. You guys have been doing it, 10 years?
Us? 10 years this year, 2011.
And people, if they don't realize it, it's actually not that hard to do. It just takes a little bit of effort.
You're right, Brandon. And I think the number one thing that people are asking, like somebody like me, for example, is where do I start? And also, if I'm regenerative, does that mean I'm organic? And if I'm organic, does that mean I'm regenerative? And because we have been lied to by, you know, the mainstream media about what things are. Okay. You know, there's so much marketing that goes behind all of these labels, and it grosses me out on every single level. What I'm more interested in is empowering farmers to become soil warriors, whether it gains them a title of some kind or not. I don't care, because I know a lot of organic farmers who are using iron to, you know, to clear out weeds and to manage weeds and things. So yes, they're producing inorganic compliant, you know, scenarios, but is that what's best for the environment? I don't know. And I'm going to say probably not, because that carbon footprint that's created by the iron and the multiple passes of tillage that's taking place to manage for the weeds, when if they may be able to eliminate 4 or 5 passes of cultivation and incorporate a cover crop of some type, maybe buy a crimper and lay down a rye mat and use that for weed coverage. Or to, you know, now that we have wheat stubble all over the whole entire United States right now, it's a blank slate. It's a perfect canvas to create something beautiful and to plant something into that, instead of just jumping out there with a disc. You know, maybe go out and drill a cover crop blend of some kind and allow it to become alive again, and to suppress the weeds that want to flush through, and you know, let it go to bed, you know, with something green on it this fall, and save your tillage till next spring if that's, you know, essential for your cultural practice. So I think the questions that I'm getting is, you know, where do I start, and what does this mean, and how do I, you know, who's doing it, and how do I make it pay? What kind of costs are associated with this? You know, I mean, it's just, there's so many questions associated with it. So somebody like myself, who's, you know, providing consultation on those kinds of things, I've been partnering with farms and helping walk them through those questions, and you know, connecting them to other farmers who are adapting, I think is really, really critical. So, you know, kudos to the Griggs Farm for really, you know, really being early adapters, I guess you could say. But this is old-fashioned practices, right? Yep. This isn't something we've invented because we're smarter today than what we were. This is how, you know, when people first started farming, this is how they kept the soil alive so that they could produce what they needed to eat. Right. Yep. So we're a little disconnected from that part these days. And so it's time to get back to old-fashioned practices. And it's very cool to be, you know, engaged in that space.
Oh, it absolutely is. And I know Kelly, yeah, of course, now Kelly, it depends on the day of the week when you call Kelly, when they're working on the plots. It depends on the day of the week. But Kelly, you guys put a huge amount of work into those plots.
Oh my gosh, how many do we have this year? Let's see. Well, Matt's doing one with Dr. Tyson Reaper. And the funny story is, okay, Mother Nature is not very nice this year. I got words for her. So we had already planned out this, I don't know how many rows it is. I think it's like 24 or so. And they were going to do it with the cover crop. They weren't going to roll it down at all. They weren't going to kill it. They were going to do like different strips and test bugs and everything. So here it is. And we've already planned it out. We've got the seed for it. And then Matt says, I'm not planting cotton there. I'm planting corn. What are we going to do? So now Griggs Farms has a cotton plot in the middle of a cornfield. Zach has to go spray this cotton after 7 months. Thank you, Zach. Thank you, Zach, for chiming in. I'm glad you're done spraying. No, I just work here some days. But like we have one field where we have the UT extension. We always have that. And so that field got ate up by slugs. And then you drive by it and people are like, what are they doing? We have cotton on the outside. Then we have the plot. And then we have soybeans down this way and soybeans down this way. And then there's corn growing inside the cotton as well. You know what? We're just trying something different. It's okay. We keep moving. So, Matt also has summer cover crops that he planted that he's doing trials on. And He's got another nitrogen test, and then he's got I got some, I don't even know. I just, some days I'm like, where are we going with flags, babe? I got my flags. Let's go.
You laugh. Yeah. I've got plots that we're doing right now. And I know that everybody thought I was absolutely crazy last week because of the test we're doing. I was running around a field with bicycle flags.
Been there.
It looked, I have this peanut looking like a golf course, like holes with the flags at each hole through this peanut field.
Oh, Christy, we've done that. And you're like going, where? Okay, 5 over? No, 6 over? Oh, wait. What do you want me to write on this? Okay, bam, 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 bam. And then you go back and they're like, okay, now go all the way down there. Put a flag there, put a flag there. That's why I always say, fun with flags.
Fun with flags.
And here was the funny thing. We were trying to shoot them spraying and applying the test products with the drone. So I set the drone in dynamic track mode, which it was supposed to track the sprayer and follow it through the field. It made it as far as the pivot and stopped and decided to follow the pivot, which was I kept saying missed. I kept hitting where it would say it lost track, and then it would turn on the pivot. I'm like, the pivot's not even running here. So yeah, it's test plots are always the most fun ever.
I mean, yeah, you get free data from it. So you know what works in years that don't. And I keep looking at Matt and I said, okay, so this year everything's crazy. So we write 2021 down as a crazy year. And maybe those cotton plots in the middle of the corn will be able to tell us something. Maybe these cotton plots in the middle of soybeans will be able to tell us something, is the soybean stealing nutrients from the cotton? Is the cotton stealing nutrients from the soybeans? Either way, it's crazy, but you're going to find out that what you're doing is either wrong or right, or something might be there and you might be like, maybe I can split this farm up because it's working out. You just don't know. And a lot of people are like, I don't have time for that. The reason you don't have time for that is because either one, you're too big of a farmer, or two, you just don't want to try something new. And that, I think, is running into a problem, is these farmers think they need to get bigger, when honestly, in years like this, that doesn't work. So
this year has been so awful. We've had several farms that have replanted 4 times. Travis Dixon, y'all got 5. Travis Dixon actually posted a picture yesterday.
Right.
He finally washed his planter because it was time to pick corn. Well, he was on like his 3rd or 4th replant of the same field. Not just a little bit, but I mean the whole thing.
They just keep getting rain. And it's just like that point, you just go, I'm going to get a chair and a cooler and just sit outside because it ain't worth it to get a good planter back in there.
Christy, what did the rain this year? And I know for vineyards, it gives them fits. What did the rain do for the grapes this year?
Well, I think, rain at certain times of the year is really critical and then also really detrimental, right? Rain this year wasn't our biggest problem. We actually endured 2 very serious frost events very late in the season. And so we actually experienced a very dramatic fruit loss because we were just about ready to push shoots out of the vines, out of the primary vines, the cordons. And basically the frost came and on a Sunday morning and melted everything off. And then what didn't get melted off or froze off, I should say, because it eventually all turns to this gooey, melty, nasty plant biomass. And it looks awful. What didn't get smoked by the first round of frost the very next night got another little mini dose of it. So it kind of was like, well, just in case you thought about being alive, we're going to go ahead and frost the rest of you all off. So there was some pretty dramatic fruit loss. Now, grapes have the ability to kick out a secondary shoot, which can produce secondary fruit. So a lot of the fruit that we're seeing on vine this year is actually secondary. Certain varieties are more susceptible to others. Our American hybrids, the hybrids that I was talking about earlier, are actually very cold hardy. They can handle the cold very, very well, but they're cold hardy, right? I mean, that doesn't mean that they can survive everything. And so some of our French varietals, which are like our Cabernets and our Chardonnays and our Riesling, they don't have that genetic tolerance to that extreme weather. They're very fussy with the weather patterns where they grow. And so that's why you see a lot of those grapes grown in very specific areas and not so much in others. So so the grapes really took it on the chin hard this year because of the frost. Now, one of the biggest concerns we have is like late season rains, right as the fruit is maturing. That's bad. That's bad for pickles. That's bad for everything. What happens is the influx of saturated soils causes the plant to uptake more water than what it really needs. And although the plant can push it through, sometimes it oversizes the fruit. It'll split or crack the fruit. And then that fruit becomes either unusable or off grade. So then the farmer is going to take a huge hit on grading. So yeah, this year for Michigan, we've had pockets of absolute torrential rain. And then we had a very severe drought. We were in a drought stage because we had inadequate snow melt from the winter, which was sucked for those of us that have snowmobiles. We wanted to go enjoy the winter fun and games because we work our butts off all the time when the sun is shining. So that was really tough, but that plays a really big role in the Great Lakes water levels. That plays a huge role in our weather, our weather patterns and on our soil saturation when we're trying to plant. So in many areas in Michigan, we planted corn into nice conditions, relatively, about perfect planting conditions, but we droughted out very quickly because we didn't have that residual water table saturated like we normally would in the spring. I mean, last year was the complete opposite. We were so cussing wet. I mean, we were planting corn in the middle of June still, and that's just ridiculous. I mean, you got to be kidding me. So, I mean, you couldn't even get your hands on a short day corn last year, because everybody was in the same boat. All the 114-day corn went back to the manufacturer or the seed company. Everything, got kind of reset to shorter maturity. So just a totally different year for us here. A couple areas, like I said, we've got some pockets here in Michigan where the rain just has not quit. We have around Lansing area, around the I-69 corridor. My goodness gracious, that area has been pounded and pounded and pounded. They just had 9 inches of rain in the last 3 weeks. And, there's areas that are still, we're still operating on 3 inches of rain since the 1st of June here, in some spots.
Great.
So it's definitely variable. Our Great Lakes do all kinds of goofy stuff to us here. So,
but grapes and apples don't fare well with lots of late season rain.
That's right. A couple of years ago, we were harvesting Honeycrisp, which is everybody's favorite, right? We started the third week of September, and the rain also started on the 16th of September. One of the farms that I worked very closely with started harvesting their early honeys, and the rains never quit. And what happened was that fruit just blew right up, and we had fruit quality issues. It picked okay, and it went into the bins okay, but 60 days later, when they pulled them out of storage to go and ship the packer, they were just completely covered in spots. It completely flushed out all of the calcium that was in there holding that skin coat together. And it just looked like it had chicken pox. It was horrible. And it was a very hard year for those growers, in spots here in Michigan that dealt with that. But you're right, Brandon, that's a huge, huge role. Now, calcium management, in-season calcium management is very, very critical in a lot of our fruiting crops to make sure we're doing the right thing and providing adequate and available calcium, and that the plant can actually get it to the fruit instead of keeping it in the leaf tissue. So, there's an art and a science to that.
There absolutely is. And it's not just a little bit of science, it's a lot of science.
Right.
Now, here's the question I got. That late frost freeze that y'all had, how bad? Because that's about the time the blueberries are starting to set blooms. How did it affect? I know down here, the late frost we had took probably 60% of the blueberries down here. What did it do up there? Were they farther back behind us that it didn't affect them as bad?
Yeah, on the blueberries specifically, we didn't see a lot of bloom damage or petal blows. I mean, it was tough on the wood, on the tree itself. They were pretty exposed. But our frost, that 1-2 frost that we got, that 2-punch frost, came about the Memorial Day weekend, and so we were most of our varieties that we grow here in Michigan were not quite at bloom yet, right? We were not quite at that very critical stage, and grapes were still pushing shoots out, right? We didn't even have hardly any leaf tissue out, except on a couple of varieties that are early bud bursts. So
y'all were really lucky then.
We really, on the blueberry side of things, we definitely lucked out. And really we had really good moisture, and we have a huge cluster of blueberries production on the southwest corner of Michigan. There's a couple counties there that are just really intensive blueberry ground. And, there's several just huge farms that you would probably recognize their names on packaging, like Carini Farms and Vandechamps, and there's lots of them that are really large scale. And these guys, were lucky enough, fortunately, they didn't get the frost quite nearly as bad as we did inland. See, I'm here in the center of the state. Let me do the quintessential Michigan here, right? I'm like, right here.
You gotta do are you from the thumb or the middle finger or the middle?
Oh, Lord, no. I'm not from the thumb. Listen, you want to offend somebody from the thumb? Tell them you're from the thumb when you're not from the thumb, okay? No, that is, you better watch your tongue, young lady.
I have lots of friends from the thumb. Trust me, they've told me, they're like, "Are you from the thumb? You better be from the thumb." I'm like, okay, all right.
That's what I'm saying. I met somebody that was from Imlay City. And so Imlay City is kind of like, it's in the center of the thumb, but not up in the thumb, right? So it's like north of Detroit, north of, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, sort of something like that. Anyway, so we're at lunch and this guy says, "Oh, you're from the thumb." And he's like, "What?" No. He suggested it. I was like, "Holy cow, you guys are really territorial up in here." Woo! Anywho, I'm from the Saginaw Bay region. I grew up in the Saginaw Bay. My family still farms. Our family farm in Saginaw Bay region, the Wackerly family farms. And several of my dad's first cousins and their sons now operate that farm up there. But yeah, so I'm physically sitting right in the middle of the Lower Peninsula of Michigan. And then the berry growing regions are predominantly on the west side, where they get a lot of buffering from the Great Lakes. But here in the center, boy, we really took a hit, and the grapes were just so tender for it. We lost a lot of apple blooms too, honestly. I mean, we had galas blooming. We had some early honeys blooming. And in terms of production, everybody's number one apple is Honeycrisp. Number 2 is Gala. And third is Fuji. Okay. And all three of those were, we really had been.
You can take a Gala and cook it and make that,
See?
I'm hungry.
Everybody's favorite.
I'm extremely hungry, and I cannot eat apples. My favorite fruit, I can't eat grapes, scuppernons, muscadines, apples, or peaches till after my surgery.
Oh, so, Lord. Peaches are full on picking right now here in Michigan. Woo!
All the good stuff I cannot eat.
Sorry about it. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to rub it in there, buddy.
But they turn grapes into wine, so you can't really eat it, but you could drink it.
Now, Christie, you said something the other day. I didn't know this. Where does most of the Welch's grapes come from?
So Welch's has a tremendous amount of Concord grape orchards here, or vineyards here in Michigan. There's a couple of counties like Berry County and down around Berrien Springs. Every single farm has some amount of Concord grapes, and those all go right into pawpaw to Welch's. It's pretty amazing. They're beautiful grapes too. I mean, we're high on the list as far as the top grape producers for them.
Oh yeah. And that's what I'm saying. People don't realize viticulture is absolutely a neat science. It literally is a neat science.
Yeah.
And Yeah.
Concord's really took it on the chin with that frost.
Oh, did they? But
Yeah.
you know, most people don't realize what it takes to grow grapes. It's not something you just grow and spray. It is something you babysit for the whole season, from January to November.
Well, so we do one thing that people don't realize when they're growing, you know, if they have a ditch row grape, you know, grapes growing in their ditch rows or grapes growing, you know, whatever, they bought a house and somebody had grapes. They don't generally have a concept, the homeowner, just the, you know, everyday folks that aren't grape farmers don't realize the amount of pruning that goes into managing grape production. So there is no less than 4 passes of actual pruning that takes place every single season, and pruning begins as soon as harvest ends. What we're trying to do is we're trying to select return buds and return shoots that are worthy of fruit next year. And like this year where we had so much loss on the fruit load, what's happening is all the photosynthesis that's taking place that would normally be, you know, those sugars would normally be pushed into the fruit, that's going into the wood. And so we're creating just wildly vigorous vines and just tons of vegetative growth because the plant needs to do something with it, right? And it can only store so much in its root in the storage unit of the vine. So, you know, any of your permanent crops like that really struggle through that. And apples, when you have a loss like we had this year, the farmers have to work really hard in pruning and managing what's left behind, even if there's no fruit, because that tree will go binary. So what that means is that will stop producing every single year, and it will want to flip over to producing every other year, which is what wild apples naturally do. So, you know, you kind of work against their nature in some regard to keep them growing and to keep them at that commercial production level when we have a fruit loss. You know, there's farmers that have been in their vineyards like 6 or 7 times already this year. Right now, what's happening in vineyards that have fruit is they're actually doing what we call leaf tucking or leaf pruning. So they're taking the vines and kind of tucking them in to expose the fruit a little bit to some sun, because the sun is very critical. Sun exposure is very critical for those bunches to actually mature and to create the sugars and the pH necessary for a winemaker to be able to do something with it.
And
so.
it is a nightmare when you have hot, humid days.
That's true of any crop.
Yeah, it is we work
Tell
very,
the crop that works for.
we work very hard with some vineyards, and some of the most frustrating things was going out on the very hot, humid days and trying to, because of powdery mildew showing up. No airflow.
That's right.
Our viticulturist, he could, all you could do is send him a picture, and his one thing was airflow.
That's right.
The only thing you can do is head through the vines. Yeah.
Right now, that picture that I showed you guys earlier, so the growth stage that particular cluster is at is what we call berry touch, which means the berries are sizing enough to just barely be touching, right? So berry touch. So you see how there's several different sizes. You can still see some space in the clusters there.
Yeah.
What we're doing right now from a pest protection or a pest management side of things is we're trying to get an application of fungicide inside of that to help prevent things like botrytis and great berry moth from setting up camp and hiding inside of our cluster and kind of rotting us out from the inside out. So then when we go back in a month or 6 weeks from now to go and harvest, those berries inside there will be rotten if we don't protect it. So this is a really critical timing for nutritionals and giving that one last big push, and then also for crop protection. So not only are my field managers or vineyard managers and their teams out there leaf pruning, leaf tucking, they're also, to improve that airflow, like you said, Brandon, but also we're out there with applications of foliar nutrients to help finish out those berries. And then also the crop protection is absolutely critical to protect with inside. I mean, once those berries touch, it's like a little locker room. And I mean, it's wet. If it gets damp, it stays damp. It's going to set up pathogens and just take off with it. So that's really critical.
A lot of people don't realize your minor nutrients, your trace elements come in very, very handy in apples and grapes.
Sure. Well, they're not suggested nutrients. They're essential. They're just needed at specific timing and in smaller quantities. So, people kind of forget and just expect something to come out of thin air for those types of nutrients. But, I do a lot of sap testing, and I use a lab here in Michigan for the sap analysis, and they work with vineyards and cannabis producers all over the US. And what we're trying to do is make sure that we're timing the nutrient application correctly and getting a very specific snapshot of what's in the xylem and phloem, right? We want to know exactly what's there. And we use leaf blade analysis as well in grapes to help guide us in those later season nutritional choices and decisions that need to be made. So, and sometimes we don't need to do any application. And that's where those tests really, really help us to gauge our program going into next year. Do we need to make tweaks to our macronutrient program? And is that affecting our micronutrient program? So, it's all layers of data to help make decisions.
And it is such a science. Even your Brix levels, everything you have involving fruit is a science. It's not what you grow in your backyard where it's, like you said earlier, it's a science.
And I love the science because it makes great wine.
Yes.
I'm staring at my wine rack right now, and I'm like, I know I have at least 3 Michigan wines sitting in there. I might have to pop them up.
You do?
Oh, I do.
Oh my gosh!
Hold on.
You better show me right now. Show me.
It's the wine show.
I do not play when it comes to my wine. Hold on.
No.
I love it.
Y'all, they kill it. Now, Christie, you got some other stuff while she's gone chasing the wine bottles down.
I'm right over here, hush.
You got some really cool stuff you're doing otherwise.
Yeah.
Bam! I had it.
Well,
okay, wait, time out. Come back to me. Show me that little girl. Whose wine is that?
12 Corners Vineyard, Beach Cottage Red, Lake Michigan.
Wonderful. So that's in our Lake Michigan wine trail down in the Pawpaw area. They're right in that neck of the woods. Beautiful winery. They have such a gorgeous location. Oh gosh, love that. What grape is that? What wine is it?
Wow, I'm getting old. Red. Beach Cottage. Oh no. This was when I was up for the Farm Women Symposium, and I flew home and I actually shipped this to my house. I was not playing. I was like, no, I'm shipping this back to the house.
Red blend, and that's probably French varietals. That's probably vinifera. So there might be some Cab Franc in there. There might be some Cab Sauvignon in there. Mm-hmm. Possibly a Pinot Noir. They grow all of those varietals in that area. So in some vineyards that are not able to produce each one of those, we'll partner with other vineyards that can produce that fruit effectively, and they will buy fruit from them, and kind of they do some horse trading on the back end so that they can have a really nice wine selection that appeals to their clients. So there is an art and science to the farming. There's an art and science to the winemaking, and then art and science of marketing to people and introducing them to Michigan wine. So
that's how I found out. Was we did like this tour, and they were like, we're going to a couple wineries, and I was like, God, that's my jam. And you go right, because first of all, I'll tell you, I have a ton of wine, but like I'm very selective about my wine. Like it'll sit there and get dust, and Matt's like, why do you got it? I'm like, you never know. Somebody could come over and you'd be like, do you want to try it? Awesome. I'm not gonna drink it by myself. But that year, that was when we were in Benton Harbor. They had a huge frost that killed everything. And the guy said, we're gonna have to get grapes from someone else. And so they did explain that this vineyard helps this vineyard and this vineyard helps this vineyard. And I was like, that's really awesome, because you can't just let someone just completely go out. And so he was saying, hey, get these wines because these might not be available. And I was like, how many can I ship home? Hey, I was just trying to help some people out, okay? When
Right.
I don't know if
Absolutely.
we have anymore. I'm like, oh, you're not gonna have any more because Kelly's now on the shipping list. So
Kelly,
I mean, yeah, there you go.
but I mean, it was really interesting because we have a winery here, and it's called the White Squirrel. It's awesome. The people that run it, their last name is Griggs. Funny story. So hi, honey. My husband just walked in. He's been chopping pigweeds. He's not happy. But we stopped there and I tried a few, and they even let Carter go out and see where the vineyard was. And they were growing peaches in the back for a new peach wine that they were going to have, like, I think in 2 years. So it really, it's an amazing science, and how one frost can just wipe you out.
Yes.
Yeah,
we had a polar vortex a few years ago that really, really damaged fruit for the.
That's what it was.
Yeah, the 2019 vintage was really damaged, especially that area, the Southwest AVA, which is a viticulture area, American viticulture area. It was damaged very heavily by that, and so they had to tear out some vineyards and completely replace vines, which
That's
is
what I was going to ask you, Christie.
insanely costly. It's insane. It's an insane amount of cost to do that. I mean, that's huge.
Yeah, it really is. It's stupid numbers. It would make you cry. But
it would.
When you have a weather event like that, and I know all of the wine is all about the Brix levels. What does that do when you have those events and it changes the flavor character of that vine, or does it change the character?
So when a vineyard has experienced some type of weather event that we know is going to damage that, like we did this year, one of the things that we've already put in place is our plans to monitor and stage harvest, right? So when they're staging harvest, what they're doing, this involves the winemakers. A lot of times the winemakers are out there in the vineyard doing the berry testing themselves. And probably if I had to prioritize certain characteristics of the grapes, I think pH would be number one priority. Okay, because it's very hard to move your acidity once it's in the tank, or especially for red wine where we are, we're letting the skin stay on, a skin contact fermentation, meaning the skin stay on the grapes in the vat for a period of time before the next phase of the winemaking begins. And so it's very, very, very difficult to move pH in those scenarios. Whereas you can do things to that to change the sugars. So the higher the Brix, generally the higher the alcohol content. And if you talk to professional winemakers, that high alcohol content is not really that desirable. In fact, it overpowers and overtakes some of the terroir, the flavor of the soil, the flavor of the characteristics of the grapes. So the people out in the vineyard are prioritizing the pH probably first, and probably secondary would be the Brix. Although we have minimums there that are required. We really want to shoot for, let's harvest when we're at the right pH level instead of worrying so much about the Brix, because we can do things to that wine through the processing to create the whatever that might be. We don't want to have a bunch of residual sugars necessarily for certain wines, unless you're producing something specifically with that. But it's definitely interesting. I've had to learn a lot about the whole process in order to be the best, the best vineyard support that I can be. So
I would just like to make a comment that my husband said, alcohol trumps everything.
It actually doesn't. A great wine is not necessarily, like you said, a high alcohol profile.
Correct.
Yeah, wine drinker.
I've got, Christie, on your flavor profiles, when you're going through you're doing your flavor profiles and they're looking at the pH. If your pH is drastically off, which doesn't have to be a lot to be drastically off, how do you change that pH in the fruit to get it to where it gets to where it needs to be?
Well, so letting it hang a little longer can sometimes allow that to happen. There's the risk reward. There's the pros and cons of letting fruit hang, especially, specifically on a red berry. Birds just, I mean, you're fighting birds at that point. Most vineyards in Michigan that are commercially producing are netting. But the kind of netting that you choose can also dictate whether or not you're going to have control or suppression of the bird damage. The longer that fruit hangs, the more attractive it becomes. The sun shines on it. It's visually appealing, and they emit terpenes, you know, kind of like express out through the skin coats, and that attracts, you know, pests. It attracts wasps. It attracts birds. And what happens there is, if you're going to let it hang to allow it to develop the pH correctly or to your desire, you run the risk of that fruit being significantly damaged by those pests. So in some situations, you may have to cut your losses and just make a decision. You know, we have a super rainy fall and we don't have, like last fall, we didn't have a lot of heat. Normally we get a nice, you know, warm summer, or like reoccurrence or resurgence in September that helps us to ripen fruit. Last year we didn't really get that. It was cold, it was overcast, it felt a lot like Seattle, and so there was no amount of hanging that was going to fix that. Yeah. So, you know, people, you know, farmers had to make that decision. These grape producers had to just make a decision. Now on the Concords, they have very, very, very specific stats. And that's basically a, you know, an in and out kind of a deal. But when it comes to winemaking, for example, where there's several different chemical processes that take place through the maturing of that wine and all through the life cycle of that wine, you know, there's a dynamic there that a winemaker has to work with sometimes. So, but that's also sometimes what makes the 2012 vintage of Pinot Noir or Petit Syrah that comes from Oregon taste so amazing, because it had this, you know, or it had that happen to it, and it created this unique characteristic. So, yeah, you know, I've been able to experience a couple of vertical tastings, is what they call it, where you'll take, like, I experienced a vertical tasting of Marquette with one of my clients, Mackinac Trail Winery. Dustin Stabile is the winemaker there. Him and his family have built a magnificent winery there. And he gave me the privilege of doing a vertical tasting of some Marquette, which is this gorgeous red grape, absolutely beautiful. And Dustin and his dad have made some really incredible things and really pioneered that cold hardy region there in Petoskey.
Well, anyway, that Marquette has a humongous flavor to it, does it not?
Absolutely. And I've had everything from this like gorgeous full-bodied red dry, you know, all the way to using Marquette in a like a table wine blend, and then even into a dry rosé or sweeter wines or ice wines. Dustin made some ice wine with it a few years ago, and it was absolutely mind-blowing. I mean, it was a dessert wine, right? But absolutely mind-blowing. And just the characteristics that can be expressed from that. And it's so fun to watch these cold hardy grapes be wines that just surprise you and just completely catch professional sommeliers completely off guard. And I love that. Just keep them guessing, keep their heads ringing.
But that's what makes it so much fun. Now, you are working on another cool project.
Yes, I am actually. Oh, there's a picture of me singing in a hemp field today. In fact, I was in the field earlier this afternoon.
Or I could do that one.
Oh gosh!
Oh girl, yes.
I was a sweat ball, completely covered in mosquitoes. It's like a jungle in there. And when I say it's like a jungle, that is not a euphemism. Look at that thing. Look at those plants. Those plants have a stalk that are an inch in diameter. An inch in diameter. They are somewhere.
My plane ticket. I want to come stand in there.
Oh my God.
Christie,
you're one of my tall friends. You know I'm 5'2".
Yeah, and if I stand next to it, it's gonna be like, oh no, it's really short.
But now, Christie, that's not just regular hemp. That is something very special you've been working on.
Yes, so actually, that particular project, we have 5 production sites for that project, and what we're doing there is we're looking at fiber specific cultivars. We have 2 varieties also that are crossover, that can cross over into grain production as well. But predominantly, we're looking at these fiber cultivars because they are going to be used very specifically in automotive applications through bioplastics. So we will cut that with a cutter bar of some kind. We have several engineers and equipment folks engaged on this project, giving some counsel and coaching and tweaking. And they show up with the equipment and their plasma cutters and their whole toolbox with them. And we're just going to keep hacking away and re-welding and make something that's going to work and be efficient and be cost effective for the farmer. There's really no use of creating and inventing brand new equipment to do this. There's no reason why we can't pull something out of the fence row or pull something out of the barn that we're using for some other application, modify it slightly and make this work. One of the biggest failures that we experienced through the industrial hemp bubble, shall we say, that kind of popped here recently is the fact that the supply chains weren't developed yet for the cannabinoids or for the grain and or fiber. Right? We are inventing an industry, right? So when was the last time we invented an industry? Come on, folks. This is serious, right? We are at the very beginning of it. And there's so many different applications for these cultivars that have these very specific material specs. So the giant, the monstrosity that is behind me in that picture has some very, very, very specific material specs that we're looking for. Brandon, you probably will be familiar with the different specifications for tobacco, right?
Yes.
So we have a different cultivar or different family of cultivars that are grown for dip versus what's grown for smokes, right? Or whatever these applications are. So in hemp is very similar in that way. We have these very specific cultivars that express these certain materials, the end use characteristics that we need. So what you're looking at behind me, we're very, very excited. We brought that. It's just incredible. I mean, it's absolutely mind blowing. And there's every single part of that plant will be utilized.
Now, Christie, they do work with it instead of drying it. They work with it at a high moisture content, don't they? Or is it dried?
So they do work with it at a higher moisture content. What we'll do is we're going to cut that and let it field wet. So what we're going to do is let it field dry. We want to reduce about 25 to 35% of the moisture out of that stalk and stem. It will then be accumulated and baled. And then the bales will be run through a processing machine that will more or less strip out the pieces and allow us to segment out the bass, the herd, all the different parts there. So there's different applications for each of those parts. We have an application for the leaves. So we're actually going to do a hand harvest of the leaf tissue off of those because we have somebody interested in doing R&D specifically with those leaves that are expressing those specific characteristics. Now, one of the problems that we have with industrial hemp or challenges that we face is the regulation for hemp. So we have to be very careful and compliant, make sure that this hemp is not going hot on us because these cultivars do not express cannabinoids in the same quantity or intensity naturally. We have very little risk of THC in these particular cultivars. But we do have to go through the validation process just like every other hemp farmer would. So we'll be testing with the state of Michigan here in the next couple of weeks. We should be harvesting by no later than the end of August on all 5 of our sites. So we have enough material there to create a research and development size run of these bioplastics. The extrusion process and pelleting process will also take place here in Michigan. And then almost all of that material, nearly 100% of that material will be plugged right into automotive applications, right? Into Automotive Alley here in Michigan. So what we're excited to do is to demonstrate and show how feathering hemp into petrochemical plastic applications can reduce the carbon footprint, can help with tensile strength, can provide a sustainable resource that can plug into something that we're consuming on large scale. And if you do the math and you think about the bigger picture here, absolutely anything we make out of petrochemical plastics, which is oil-derived plastics, everything from your Solo cup to your straws to everything that's plastic around you, can be made with bioplastics. So whether that be based from soybeans or from corn bioplastics, we see these all over the world already. But the adaptation of bioplastics has been hindered by a couple of things, and that's competition for the livestock market. So we need to be able to make a way, and we need to be able to engage industry at large and get them to adapt to bioplastics so that our farm acres can be utilized differently and more efficiently. We're also setting a really cool little piece of this, which has my heart and is my passion, and that is the soil quality implications of a hemp crop. And so this is really interesting and something that that has become more and more prevalent to be discussing in the households. If you would have asked 2 years ago what carbon sequestration was, 10 out of 10 people would have looked at you like, huh? But you talk about it today, yes, normal people would never have even had a concept of what that is. Farmers been farming carbon since day one, right? but what we're talking about now is cultural and social, right? So there's a cultural and a social movement towards reducing our carbon footprint, whether or not you want to buy into climate change or any of the other, religious components of this. What we do know for a fact is our soils are being depleted, and desertification is happening. And a couple of movies that have been produced over the last several years. Oh, nice. Oh, you missed the chocolate, buddy. Oh, right in the corner. Missed it. Character. Well, that nut doesn't fall far from the tree, I'll tell you that.
Welcome to 13.
Oh God. So we're studying the carbon implications of this hemp project, and we're using Haney soil health assessments. We're using some different testing that's not mainstream at this point. We're utilizing a tool called topsoil that's allowing us to mesh this data together and create usable documentation that helps us to create a baseline, for where our farms are at right now, and then looking at that over time. So this is, yes, we're doing something here in this growing season, but there's a long view to making change in the soil that would eventually make change in the climate. It didn't happen overnight to get us where we're at today. It's not going to happen overnight, and it isn't going to be a single crop that's going to save the world. But if there is a crop that has that kind of potential, it would be hemp. And feathering hemp into different places is the goal. Finding fits for it for the market, and then finding places that it can help restore soil.
Now that was
honey. We can grow hemp.
Christie is Carter, you could have at least turned it upside down. If you were going to do it, you could have turned it upside down.
I just told Matt, I'm like, we're going to start growing hemp now.
What kind of rotation, because of what it does in such grand scheme with hemp, with the soil, what kind of rotation does it legitimately look like it would be a good one to run on a regular basis? I know we've had good luck with sun hemp, which is totally different, but it makes humongous, you've got the biomass, you've got the nitrogen. It does make a huge difference in the soil.
What my ideal positioning for hemp outside of a marketable crop would be to include it in a cover crop blend. Okay. So I would love to see industrial hemp with multiple species legumes. I would love it. And I think because it has multiple root architecture types within that plant. So we get these beautiful brace roots, we get these gorgeous laterals, and then we get this dense fibrous root that is it's magnificent. And it does some of the things that rye does. It does some of the things that, that some canola and some of our other, crops do for us. And it's in one package, in one seed. So I would really love to see that involved in the cover cropping systems and maybe included in filter strips and that kind of thing. We're using hemp in places that have experienced nuclear fallout, nuclear accidents that have happened over the years to help remediate and sequester some of that and convert those radioactive isotopes into non-harmful compounds. And the industrial hemp plant has some really interesting potential there. I'm involved in a lot of groups, professional groups that are really going deep on this, down the rabbit hole, to really find the answers and to dig out what we're doing there, right? So, and it's a big, big project. And so I've really, adapted the mantra, less talk, more do. I have found myself talking to people that are like, yes, preach, sister, preach. And I'm like, listen, I'm done preaching to the choir. I want to talk to farmers.
Yeah.
I want to talk to farmers. I'm done talking to industry people that are like, yeah. You know,
it makes such a huge difference.
Correct.
I was when we did the test plot down here for the state, I was amazed at the results that come out. It was dead ground. It was it was dead.
Get out. You're done. Goodbye. Go actually clean something. See yours.
It was dead ground, and the results we had after 100 days in the ground.
It's crazy.
A shadow where it used to be on the wall.
What I find interesting, Brandon, honestly, with hemp is whether you're growing for a cannabinoid, you're growing a different plant architecture, you're growing a different crop. Okay, so I wish that we could segment cannabinoid hemp and separate that out from the industrial hemp, because industrial hemp is the same but different, right? It has some different applications. It has 50,000 plus different applications. Where our cannabinoid plant, we're harvesting and doing something completely different with that. And that market is still infantile as well. You know, the cannabinoid production like CBD and CBN and CBG and CBC, that's all building and growing. But that market needs to get figured out. And that market being regulated by the states the way that it is making it very difficult for craft hemp farmers to survive. And I wish it didn't have to be that way, but that's really, unfortunately, that's where it's going.
And you're right. I'll tell you something funny that happened though, and I couldn't help, but this field that we had was in the middle of a 900-acre location, completely secluded. You had to walk through woods, big woods, for about 3 miles to get to this field. And I got a call one day and said that they'd found ribbon. The game warden had found pink ribbon running through the woods all the way to our plot. And we got there, and they had taken a large percentage of it. Somebody had cut probably 60 or 70 plants. And the only thing I could say was, I cannot wait to see how they dry and try to smoke back. Because
joke's on them.
I was like, oh wow. Because when we ran the test, we had to run the test for Georgia, and it went to 3 separate labs it went to, and the state handled all of it. We didn't do any of that. They came out, took samples, did what they did, and then we handled the regeneration in there. And the funniest thing I could say was that they toted for a better part of 3 miles, 30 or 35, maybe 40 plants. And they were 10, 12 feet tall at the time. So somebody toted a lot of stuff for a long way for nothing.
I'm telling you. I still get, even still today, as much information is out there on industrial hemp, I still today get people ask me, you know, the old Cheech and Chong questions. It's like, seriously? Get with the times, man. Oh man.
Like, how many states are legal now? Come on, just go to a state and figure it out. Like,
well, Michigan is recreational legal, and actually, I have several clients that are producing cannabis for the recreational market and for the medical market. Outdoor cannabis this year saw an explosion and boom, and a lot of the producers are, well, there you go. There's me in one of my clients' fields. You know, as you can see behind it's all of those are tagged for medical production. So they have a QR code on every single plant that we, you know, every time we touch those plants, we're logging into a system, everything we do to them, any of our observations and anything, so that we can put good quality, clean medicine into the system to have access for medical marijuana patients.
It is very stringent on what you have to do with this plant.
Oh yeah, it should be. It's medicine.
Absolutely.
It should be. You know, this is not your, you know, Uncle Rico's basement weed. You know what I'm saying? Or ditchweed. This is legitimate material. Yeah. And I love the fact that plant-based medicine is also experiencing a renaissance, right? because I truly believe in the healing powers of the hemp plant and of the cannabis plant. And it really excites me to be able to share that with people and to stay part of this industry. It's really cool. I love my job. Did you know I work with hops too? Like I have all the cool, I work with all the cool stuff.
So basically, Christie works with all the cool stuff that can get you drunk and get you high. This is why I like her, because like, hello.
And get you healed. Hello.
Yes.
There you go.
Hops is got to be absolutely crazy to have to deal with.
It's really neat. I've actually visited a farm.
Yeah, it really is.
Help him, please.
Hey, Carter,
Stop.
come back. Hold on.
Come back. Come on. Say everybody hi. Look how tall this child has gotten now. He's 13.
First off, an hour ago, you were worried that when Mom and I were talking that you were going to be on the live. All right, so when are we going skydiving?
Whatever you want. Notice the child who was on a TV show who would not stop talking, now does not talk anymore.
I'm not getting paid.
I'm not getting paid. That's what he said.
He's a little capitalist.
But yeah, now hops, Christie, on the hops, what do y'all go through with those? I mean, that's not just something you grow every day.
Hops is very complicated. Almost all hops farms utilize drip irrigation to deliver water and liquid nutrients to the plants. A bulk of the hops that are grown in the world are actually grown in Washington State, in Yakima Valley. And so a majority of the hops that go into, say, your Bud Lights and your Miller Lights, people don't believe me that there's hops in there, but let me just tell you there is. And they more than likely are coming out of Yakima Valley. What's grown here in Michigan is what we would consider craft hops for craft beer. And so craft beer has their distinctions of determining like what layer, microbrewery, nano brewery, what layer you fall into in terms of your beer production. But our hops producers are, we went through a boom for a while. Then we receded in total growers here in Michigan and acreage because the marketplace was kind of saturated at the point. There still was a need for it, but not in a growth pattern, because breweries were kind of like, one was opening up over here, but one was closing over here. And so like the craft brewing market space that was consuming craft hops weren't, exploding with growth anymore like they were earlier in the 2000s. And so, that whole like industry is kind of tapered off, but it's leveled out. People aren't going out of business anymore. It's kind of leveled out. So, there's quite a bit of hop production here in Michigan, in fact. And I work with the huge hops producer down in Indiana as well, down east of Indy. And those guys are phenomenal, and we have such a great time. But, it has different nutritional needs, no different than raising a kid. I mean, you're not going to feed a Big Mac to a baby. You're not going to feed a formula to a teenager. So, having a plan in place and working with a crop advisor that knows what they're talking about in hops is really, really important. And listening with both ears, right, is huge.
Okay, so when I was there in Michigan, they said, I can't remember which town has the craft brewery or the craft beer festival?
Beer City, USA. Beer City, USA is Grand Rapids, Michigan.
I'm telling you.
Yes.
I mean, everybody needs to go to Michigan because fruit, vegetables, wine, and then they have a beer festival.
Yeah, the craft beer culture in Michigan is really, really rich. The Upper Peninsula actually relies predominantly on tourism. Once upon a time it was huge iron ore industry, but that has kind of tapered down now to, more agritourism. And the craft breweries, the craft wineries, the agritourism sites have become the thing. And I'm telling you, there is endless parts of Michigan to experience. The craft distillery business is starting to boom. There's one in Thompsonville, Michigan, called Iron Fish Distillery, absolutely brilliant distillery, and they do all these craft cocktails, and they have these wood fire pizzas and a huge outdoor venue. There's a place in Elk Rapids, Michigan called Ethnology. These guys are just absolutely brilliant, and they're using all Michigan ingredients. Ethnology has part of their credo for their business is to source everything within as absolutely closely as they possibly can. And I'm going to tell you, they make a bourbon-esque type product called Mel, and it is phenomenal. If you like bourbon or whiskey, you will love Mel. Jerry is the chemist there. She is the genius behind everything that pours out of those bottles, and it is such a cool place to be a part of. So, yeah, gorgeous state, and just tons of cool stuff to do.
On the hops, does it create kind of a flavor profile just like you would with grapes or any other?
Yes. So hops has a very distinctive flavor profiling system, and it's judged by alpha acid, beta acids. It has several different like measures and specifications, and then terpenes, right? So I talked about terpenes earlier being expressed out of the grapes. All fruit, vegetables, all things have some amount of terpenes, right? So this is like the language the plants speak. And so different species of or cultivars of hops, for example, might express more citrus. One might express more bitterness. There's a bitterness scale. And then there's these graphs. They look like little spider webs that the hops producers will profile their hops once they're harvested and cured. They harvest them, run them through a dryer, kiln, and then put them through a processing and pelletizing them for the brewers to use. But when they go through that process, they test them and create what's called like a certificate of analysis. So similar to like your analysis on your fertilizer drug or your analysis on your industrial hemp terpene profiles, what you're doing is basically saying this hops has these qualities. And so as a brewer, you're going to be looking for certain things. So if I'm going to produce a beer like a double IPA, I want something that has qualities that are in the bitterness realm. I want qualities of citrus notes. Depending on what brew style and depending on what your beer needs to taste like, that brewer is going to be sourcing ingredients based on those characteristics: alpha acids, beta acids, all the way down into terpene profiling. So that is very, very critical. So there's Cascade and Chinook, and there's a couple of private cultivars. Idaho number 7 is very popular. I see somebody just popped on about, producing in Idaho. There's lots of different cultivars growing all throughout the area. Here in Michigan, we grow copper, and we grow Chinook and a couple others that are very highly desirable for growers. A lot of what you see, in craft beer starts out with like Cascade. That's very, very popular. And Centennial hops is very, very popular. So those are kind of like your base, run of the mill, I should say, not to diminish what they bring, but everybody uses Cascade and Centennial in a lot of their brewing techniques. Now, the smaller quantities, the more specialties like the copper, like the Chinook, Zaz is another one, ZAAZ. They're out of Czech Republic or Hungary. That region of the world also produces hops. There's some really neat things. There's a hops producer in New Mexico that's figured out how to outsmart his climate and produce some really cool flavor profiles there, right? So neat stuff. There's hops grown all over. There's a hops production, field production research in Florida, which is really interesting. And they're double cropping. They're growing 2 crops a season. So it's very cool. I have really, really enjoyed the Michigan Hops Growers Association has welcomed me with open arms. I have a great relationship with our extension educators that focus on hops here in Michigan, Rob Sarine and Aaron Lazat, and Timothy Miles, our pathologist, our entomologist, our weed science. Great people, and such a fun crop to work with. And I have the best customers. I have the best clients. I really, really enjoy that particular crop a lot.
And that's that. But Christie, you enjoy your job. You got a pretty cool job.
I don't have a job. It's a lifestyle. I am blessed way more than I deserve.
Now, Kelly, I just saw the eye roll. I saw you had your mic turned off, and I saw the eye roll.
Carter.
I'm surprised mine hasn't come in and plopped down tonight. Well, it's getting that time where we actually kind of went over the time, but we're good there. Now, Kelly, you guys have been having some fun. What all you guys got going these days?
Everything broke before we left on vacation. And I mean everything. I think 80% of our equipment has now broke down. So that's a fun check to write. We just sprayed cotton again. Bugs are out. Unfortunately, our cotton is 3 weeks behind. So I don't know how that's going to work out.
The delayed planting and rains.
Yeah.
The weather's been absolutely horrible for anybody that has cotton.
Yeah.
Cotton that was 3-bale cotton last year will be lucky to do a bale and a half this year.
I've been following Kelly's, feeds on Instagram and Facebook. So I recall, some of the heartbreak that she was sharing on her social media.
We're gonna be friends.
Out there, Kelly, Matt will take the stiffer alcohol, and Kelly will take the wine. But please ship
I still have the moonshine too, so we're good. So, yeah. And then hold on, Christy, you're gonna love this. And in a really bad year, Rodney's gonna pull through. Hold on, let me grab Rodney.
Oh dear.
So if we lose pretty much all the cotton crop, Rodney will be making an appearance.
Oh, that's called a magnum. Oh yeah. This girl don't play around. As my
husband would say, I don't play, I failed recess.
Gang, we're glad you guys all joined us tonight, and we'll be back here next week.
And don't forget, I'm taking over in the middle of this month.
And I promise I will not be able, I do not think they will let me pop into the show this time.
No, it's going to be my show. Leave me alone. Let me do my thing. You stay away. I already have guests lined up and everything. I've been texting them while we've been talking.
Last year when I had my surgery, it was actually this time last year. She was trying to do the show, and I had control of the show in my computer. I was heavily sedated, and I would pop in. They would take me off. I would pop back in.
He'd be like, "Hi guys."
I had surgery that day and was still sedated. I had blood. I mean, I literally had stitches and was not supposed to be walking. And I'm sitting at the camera, and they would take me off, and I'd take myself back on. And it was awful. I won't do that.
No, please don't. Please don't. No.
Well, gang, I appreciate y'all being here. We'll get off of here and have a great night. Christy, thank you so much for joining us.
Gosh, you guys, it's so fun to just reconnect with you all. I really, really love the Farm Life page. I love the Farm Life community, and I love the two of y'all just with all my heart. You guys are just the best. So thank you for giving me a chance to blah, blah, blah about the things that I'm so excited and I love. And most of all, thank you to all you farmers out there doing the hard work. We could not do this without you, and there's no reason for us without you guys.
Christy, thank you so much. Kelly, you have a great night. And for every one of y'all out there, you guys be safe, because we're fixing to start hitting that time of year where we're going to be going without thinking, going without sleep. So let's take it one step at a time, and let's make it all safely. In the meantime, you guys all have a great night, and we will see y'all next week. Bye.
Bye.